Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad, the definitive show on Airbnb hosting, featuring the best advice on how to maximize profits from your Airbnb listing, as well as real-life experiences from Airbnb hosts all over the world. Welcome.
Get paid for your pad. 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 Get paid for your pad.
Before learning about Aviva IQ, I used to spend so much time managing my guest communications manually. Now, with Aviva IQ's easy-to-use automated service, my workload has reduced by 80%. Did I mention it's free? Automate your Airbnb messages now at www.avivaiq.com.
Welcome to Get Paid for Your Pad. My name is Jasper, I'm your host, and today I'm hosting this episode with the one and only Glenn Carter, Head of Marketing of Hostfully. Glenn, how's it going?
It's going good, Jasper. How are you?
I'm good, man. Are you safe from Hurricane Irma there in up north in Toronto?
Yeah, I'm in Montreal, and
Montreal.
we are very far away from the tragedy that's unfolding down south. It's just amazing watching the footage on the news about what's going on.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Actually, my country was affected a little bit too because we have a few tiny little islands in the Caribbean. One of them is called Sint Maarten. And I think 70% of the infrastructure has been wiped out. So it's pretty horrific, the damage done there.
Yeah, and they're just getting now to starting to plan out the disaster response. And that's what a massive undertaking that's going to be.
Absolutely. And of course, as always, Airbnb has created a special page where people can either find shelter or as an Airbnb host, you can sign up to provide free accommodation to people who had to flee for the storm, the evacuees. The URL is a bit difficult, but if you just Google Hurricane Irma, Airbnb, free listings, then I'm sure you'll find it. I've actually had a look at the site. There's quite a lot of homes being offered for free all across the southeast. Actually, there's people offering up their homes in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, even in Indiana. There's actually an article on ABC News that talks about a family from Jacksonville, a family of 4 with 2 dogs. And the children are autists, so they have special needs. And they drove 795 miles, if I recall correctly, to stay with Mr. Thompson in Indiana. And he offered this family to stay at his home for free. So a little shout out to Mr. Thompson. He has a dance studio. It's called So Into Dance. So definitely props to him for having this family and letting them stay for free.
Yeah, and there's still, for all Airbnb hosts out there who have a little bit of free space, there's still time to sign up. And I know Airbnb is waiving all their service fees to book properties in these areas. I think up until the 28th of September, if I'm not mistaken, Jasper. So encourage all Airbnb hosts out there to contribute and offer up some space.
Yeah, September 29th. That's right.
Okay.
Awesome. Let's see, there was a little success story in regulation land. As most people probably are aware, Berlin is one of the places in the world where Airbnb has been made almost impossible, especially if you want to rent out an entire home. There's very strict regulations on Airbnb hosting in Berlin and very high fines, up to 100,000 euros. So it's a bit scary, but there's one host who didn't agree with the strict regulations, and he actually took the state of Berlin to court, and because he wasn't allowed to rent out his home on Airbnb, he didn't get a permit, and he didn't take no for an answer. So he took the state to court, and he won. And the court ruled that he should be allowed to rent out for 182 days per year. Which is quite interesting because that's exactly half a year minus 1 day. So I guess the thoughts that the judge had was that if you live in a house and you're away, you should be allowed to rent out your place so that that space can be used efficiently and doesn't rest empty. And, the limit was set at, less than a half year. I guess 182 days is just less than half year. So that's an interesting time frame, especially when you compare it to other cities like Amsterdam, London, and Paris, where it's like 60, 90, and 120 days.
Yeah, it was interesting to see this number because, like you mentioned, Jasper, in other areas, other municipalities, they were much lower than 182 days. So with Berlin being so anti-Airbnb, then to go to 182 days was a bit of a change of heart. But I mean, the decision from it was the Berlin Administrative Court. It was, a good thing for Airbnb. It essentially overturned the earlier decision that effectively banned short-term rentals. In order for other Airbnb hosts now to be given the same permit, they'd have to go through the same court process, which isn't really sustainable. But it's a step in the right direction, and it's a tone that I think many other municipalities across the globe are taking. This sort of compromise that, if it's your primary residence, you should be able to rent it out for a certain period of time. So I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. And in major European cities as well, I think this is going to give more accommodation options for tourism as well. And I think there was another article about the UK and how there's been a surge in Airbnb hosts there. So I think municipalities are going to realize as well that as they learn to compromise with platforms like Airbnb, they're going to also see a increase in tourism dollars, which obviously helps out their local economies.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an interesting discussion to have. I think most people agree that outside of the busy cities, the larger cities, people should be allowed to do Airbnb. I mean, if you own a property, then I believe you should be able to do whatever you want. But I can see the arguments against that in the larger cities where there's a housing shortage. But I think outside of the larger city, everyone's kind of agree, right? But then the question is, how long should people be allowed to rent out? In the busy city centers? I guess the general consensus is that if you live somewhere and you go on a holiday, then you should be allowed to rent out your space because, it doesn't help anyone that your apartment is sitting empty. That's the whole idea of Airbnb. It's using resources in a more efficient way. It's using the space and for empowering people to make their space available when they're not using it so that other people can use it. So I think that argument probably everybody agrees on. What not everybody agrees on is then how long should people be allowed to do that? Because it's one thing to rent out your place when you're on holiday, but it's another thing when, some investment firm buys up a bunch of apartments and lists them on Airbnb full time and never without the intention of ever even living in that space. I think those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum. And somewhere in the middle, most people will pick some point in the middle. Some people will say, well, 30 days is reasonable. Like, who goes on holiday more than 30 days? But then there's also people who travel a lot for work. Like, for example, there's an article about a host in Iceland, which is it's an interesting article because this is a host who actually wants to play by the rules. Her name is quite complicated to pronounce, but let's just call her Maria. And she works for a circus. And so she has to travel a lot for work. She might be out of the country for, let's say, like 3, 4, or up to 6 months. And then if there's a rule that says that you can only rent out for 1 month, then basically that means that the apartment's going to sit empty for, all of the other time that she's out of town, which again doesn't really help anyone. So it's, this is kind of a complicated discussion, but what are your thoughts on that, Glenn?
Yeah, well, I think more and more people are traveling with work. And, I think I absolutely agree with you that people should be allowed to do what they want with their own property, assuming that they're not affecting anyone else's ability to enjoy life. So in large condo buildings, I see the argument that, if I live next to an Airbnb rental, that, every couple of days there's new tenants in there. And I live in Montreal, so it's a big party city, a lot of young people coming here. So I can definitely see the argument there that if I own a condo in a big high rise, I don't necessarily want to be living next door to that. But I think on the other side of the coin, if I'm traveling with work, there should be a certain amount of days that I should be allowed to rent out my own property while I'm away, and that gives me the opportunity to earn some extra income, which then I'm going to spend in the local economy. But on the commercial side, it's tricky. It's not as cut and dry as saying, well, commercial operators shouldn't be allowed where individual homeowners should, because you think about all of these. I'm just thinking, beach communities, where there's, some of the biggest businesses in these communities are vacation rental companies who have, 100 properties and they're renting out, beach houses. Are we now saying that they shouldn't be allowed on the Airbnb platform because they're commercial operators? Well, I don't think so. They're a huge provider of jobs in these communities, and they drive a lot of tourism dollars in the local economy. So I think it's a very, very difficult discussion to have, and there's a lot of gray areas. But I think Berlin has this is a step in the right direction, and I think other municipalities are realizing that there are compromises. But just to touch back on the commercial operators, I'm not suggesting that commercial operators should be treated the same as individual hosts. They certainly should be paying the same taxes that a hotel would. So as long as they adhere to municipal guidelines and bylaws and all that kind of thing, I think they should absolutely be allowed to operate on Airbnb.
And you think that should be the case as well for like the busy city centers, like downtown Manhattan, places like that?
Well, it depends. It's a case by case, and that's why I'm really encouraged by seeing Airbnb negotiating at a very local level with these different municipalities, because what's true for beachfront San Diego isn't true for downtown Manhattan. So I think downtown Manhattan might be a different story, where someone shouldn't be allowed to buy up, and maybe Manhattan's a bad example, but I'm thinking like Vancouver, where housing prices are sky high and so are rents. Should someone be able to buy up an entire floor of a condo building and do Airbnb as opposed to long-term rental? There go putting stress on the already tight long-term rental market. Probably not, I think, in most cases. So, but like I mentioned before, it's a case-by-case basis based on the municipality, based on the tourism industry. And I think negotiating and coming up with location-specific regulations is a smart idea.
There's been a incident in Christchurch in New Zealand where a family from Malaysia, a family of 10, was admitted to hospital after suffering from burns and smoke inhalation after escaping a fire in a 3-story summer house in a neighborhood called Clifton Tice, if I read correctly. And the house was completely burned down. And this kind of raises the issue that's been discussed a lot as well, the issue of safety. There's Airbnb has been advocating hosts to install safety equipment such as smoke alarms and fire extinguishers. But, obviously not everyone is doing that. If you're renting out a room or you're renting out a small house, now are you really going to install all the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, fire extinguishers, and even create like evacuation plans and stuff like that? I think for most people that's probably a step too far. I've never really seen it in any of the Airbnbs where I stayed. But Airbnb now is stepping up their efforts to make people aware of the safety situation in their Airbnbs. They're talking about providing 36,000 smoke detectors for free. But then the article also states that if you look on the website and you look at the terms and conditions, it actually means that the cost of the alarms will be deducted from the future host payments. But again, this article gives rise to an interesting discussion about, to what extent should Airbnbs, provide the same type of safety precautions as hotels do. What are your thoughts, Len?
I think there's an opportunity for Airbnb to step up here. I know they have responsible hosting guidelines, and those ask all hosts adhere to safety precautions, local government safety regulations. But I don't know if they're enforcing that. I don't know if there's a way of enforcing that. I know, for instance, here in Montreal, if I have a long-term rental property, every couple of years, I have to submit a document to the government saying that I have updated fire alarms. I've tested them, and sign so that I'm responsible if something does happen, to say that I've tested the fire alarms, they're up to date. I don't know if that's something that that Airbnb can really enforce or wants to enforce, but I think there's an opportunity for, exactly like you said, provide free fire detectors to Airbnb hosts who want them, like they did the photography thing for a long time. I think there's an opportunity for Airbnb to step up here to sort of win in the PR battle that this is going to cause, because it's going to happen again. I mean, this is a tragic story in New Zealand, but it's going to happen again, and the Airbnb critics are going to jump all over it again, showing that, this is just another example of wayward capitalism and unregulated illegal rentals gone bad. So I think Airbnb should be getting in front of this.
Yeah, and the hotel industry has always argued that Airbnb should be exposed to the same safety regulations as the hotels are, which I think is not really a valid argument, because if you have a hotel building with 50 or 100 rooms, I mean, that could be a bit of a labyrinth. Like, to find the nearest exit in a hotel is not very clear sometimes. But if you're staying in a small apartment, I mean, you know where the exit is, right? You know where the front door is. I mean, you don't really need a safety card with information about evacuation routes. I mean, it's like you just run for the door.
Yeah, no, I mean, comparing someone's condo that's an Airbnb rental to a hotel is completely ridiculous. It's 100% different. And I think most hosts, I would hope, have, I mean, at least in probably most first world countries, there's guidelines for insurance purposes that a lot of people have to abide to. If you live in a building, I know my building here in Montreal, they come every year and test the fire systems. But I guess it's a case by case basis, and I think there's it's an easy win, at least on the fire side. It's an easy win to just provide fire detectors to Airbnb hosts who want them.
Hosts, if you're anything like me, you have multiple standard messages you send to every guest. I used to copy-paste those messages every time I had a new guest. But then I learned about Aviva IQ, and I'm an absolute fan. I copied my repeatable messages into Aviva IQ and told it when I want each message to be delivered. Now, all my guests get personalized check-in messages and personalized check-out messages at the exact time I want them to, automatically. I also use Aviva IQ to send a message to guests when a vacancy exists after their scheduled checkout day and invite them to stay longer. It's amazing how it's turned into free money for me on multiple occasions already. So sign up for free at www.avivaiq.com. You'll be glad you did.
Let's see what else is out there in the news today or this week. Britain has become a pretty popular place for travelers using the Airbnb platform. Airbnb has seen an 80% jump in visitors to Britain in the last year, which is quite a substantial increase. And apparently this has to do with the value of the pound going down quite a bit as a result of the Brexit. £1 now equals 1.33 US dollars, where a couple of years ago it was all the way up to 160, 170. So Britain's gotten a lot cheaper for Americans. It's kind of going back to the 1950s, where Americans could come to Europe and live like a king for a fraction of the cost of what it was in their homeland. So a lot of Americans taking advantage of that and traveling to England. Not just Americans, I guess. I mean,
don't leave us Canadians out.
Even Canadians, right? I heard the Canadian dollar is doing pretty well, no?
Yeah. We're actually we're doing pretty well. Our economy is rebounding nicely, and our central bank is raising interest rates, which is good and bad. But we're doing pretty well. I'm thinking of packing my bags and taking a tour to London myself.
Yeah. No, I would encourage that.
It was a really, really interesting article, and what I really was intrigued by is the data that it showed that the average UK host earns £3,000, which is about $4,000 US per year, and they host an average of 36 nights per year. So again, this just drives home the point to me that I think is obvious to all of us who follow this, is that, this is mom and pop operations of people earning a couple extra bucks. I mean, $4,000 a year, that's a lot of money to some, but we're not talking about, earning a second income. This is really just supplemental income, and 36 nights per year is ultra part-time. This is not full-time rentals. And another thing I saw that was interesting is that this increase in activity in Airbnb in the UK makes it the fifth largest geography for Airbnb globally. So I found that pretty interesting. And also, the data here, there's lots of data to comb through, but the average age of a host in the UK was 43. So I found that quite interesting.
Would you expect it to be younger?
Yeah. I thought that it would be younger, but I think we're seeing, and actually the fastest increasing demographic for them was people over the age of 65 deciding to host. So maybe this is retirees who are looking for a little side project to bring in some supplemental income, keep them busy, keep them social, meet new people. I've written about this before, and I know you have as well, Jasper, that I think, well, the sharing economy platforms more generally, but Airbnb in particular, is a fantastic retirement gig for a lot of people, because there's so many benefits from, staying social, active, meeting new people, a little bit of supplemental income, all that stuff. It's great for retirees.
Absolutely. By the way, different topic, but are you into Bitcoin and blockchain technology?
I've obviously heard of it, but I'm not overly familiar with that.
There's a couple platforms that are raising money now on through these digital currencies. One of them is called Winding Tree. One of them is called Atlant, and these companies envision that in the future we won't be needing centralized platforms like Airbnb and with big companies like Airbnb to match demand and supply. They envision a world where this could all be done on the blockchain technology. And so, obviously we're in the very, very early stages, and it's a big question mark if this is actually going to happen. But I did find it interesting, because when you look at these companies, they're raising a lot of money. There's all sorts of companies popping up in the blockchain space, and these companies, basically, based on the white paper, they're raising millions and millions of dollars, up to $100 million sometimes, which is kind of crazy. It kind of reminds me of the .com times, when you had a startup and you were doing something with the internet, just showing that you were getting some users was enough reason for investors to just pour millions of dollars into the company. That's like kind of what looks like it's going on again. But anyway, I've been talking to the people behind Atlant, which is definitely an interesting platform. I don't completely understand it yet, but anyway, I just wanted to mention it. I'm talking to the people behind it, and hopefully I'll get one of them to come on the podcast to explain how Airbnb and the blockchain could be combined, and how in the future potentially the blockchain technology could make companies like Airbnb obsolete. Wow,
it's a bold statement. I don't really have an opinion on that because I'm not overly familiar with the technology, but it's definitely making a splash, because I read an article yesterday that I think it was in Manhattan. There was a condo development that they're actually accepting Bitcoin as payments for units in that building, and it's the first time that's ever happened.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is definitely becoming more accepted in different businesses. But the one thing I will say is that the question that I have is, do these businesses actually hold on to those Bitcoins, or do they just convert them back into the local currency immediately, where it's almost more like an exchange service, where there's these companies, for example, BitPay. Like if you order something online with Bitcoins, what happens is that the intermediary will take the Bitcoins and will sell them to the local currency, and then will provide the business owner with the local currency. So, in my opinion, I'd be really interested to see if companies are actually going to allow payments in Bitcoin and then actually hold on to them. So that's we'll see if that's going to happen in the future. All right, Len, thank you so much for joining me today and discussing the news in the world of Airbnb. It was a pleasure as always, and looking forward to talking to you again in about 3 or 4 weeks or so.
Yes, Jasper, you too, and I hope you enjoy Stockholm. Do you have any specific tourism plans on the go today?
No, I am here actually participating in a coaching program, so I'm actually going to be working the next 3 weeks. I'm going to be pretty busy, so not too much time for sightseeing.
All right, well, good luck, and great chatting with you as always.
All right, and for the listeners, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this podcast episode, and of course on Monday we'll be back with another one, so hopefully I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Get paid for your pet. 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 Get paid for your pet.